here by the disposal regulations, which means this waste has to be disposed as per the rules set by the government. Then we have electronic waste, which means again we have cells, cell phones, computers, TVs. Now it is very important to recycle the electronic waste. Why? Because electronic waste has to be recycled. Why? So as to recover valuable materials like copper. So it is very important to recycle the electronic waste, because not each and everything of the electronic waste is a waste. By recycling, we can recover valuable materials such as gold and copper. Then household waste such as batteries, pesticide, right? Now again, it is very important to segregate such household hazardous waste. Why? Because if you mix these hazardous waste with, let's say, regular waste, it would lead to pollution. It can also be a reason for catching fire, right? And then we have radioactive waste. Now radioactive waste is a waste that arises from the nuclear power plant, or let's say laboratories. Now these are extremely dangerous and toxic. That's the reason we need advanced technology. Why? We need advanced technology so as to ensure that the waste generated from the nuclear power plant, or let's say laboratories, is disposed using scientific methods, so as to ensure that the impact of waste is not impacting the environment and the society, right? Okay. So let us focus on some stats now. Let us focus on some stats. See, by 2026, the waste generation in urban areas is expected to be 0.7 kg per person per day, which is nearly 4 to 6 times higher than in 1999. If I talk about the current waste generation, India generates 62 million tons of waste annually. This includes recyclable and non-recyclable materials. This figure is growing at an average annual rate of 4%. Then these are the different types of waste, and then the future, the generation of municipal solid waste is expected to increase by 165 million tons by 2030, which means from 62 million tons to 165 million tons. This is the data that I have gathered from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change website. So these stats, this data is very important for you to mention in your mains examination. So I request you to please make a note of this data. The data will be available in the DNA notes. The link is provided in the comment box. So all those interested to revise this content can download the DNA notes from the link, right? Okay. So if I talk about the waste management, the traditional waste management. So for the past 100-150 years, the informal workers, also referred to as kabadi walas, kabadi walas. Now these kabadi walas had a very important role and still have a very important role when it comes to waste management. Waste. Now what is waste management? As I told you, segregation. You segregate the waste, you collect the waste, you transport the waste. At the same time, you also recycle the waste, that is treat the waste. So the kabadi walas for the past 150 years had a very important role to play in the waste management. However, because of the low income, now the kabadi walas, they earn money only after selling waste. Only after selling waste they generate money. Now the low income of the kabadi walas is insufficient for them to adopt modern means to treat the waste that they collect. insufficient income, which means they do not have ample avenues or more money to adopt modern waste management practices. At the same time, the kabadiwalas are subjected to rampant exploitation, which means they are subjected or they are forced to clean the waste without any safety or safe gears. So I hope you must have seen the garbage centers where people segregate the waste. They do not even have a safety gear, no gloves, nothing. And the garbage where people simply cannot even pass by because of the bad smell emitting from the garbage center. And here we have kabadi walas who, without using slippers, without using any safety gears, have to segregate the waste. So they are subjected to rampant exploitation and they earn very little. This is how the kabadiwalas are exploited, right? Then see, the responsibility of waste management does not rely or does not lie solely on the government bodies. No, we think that waste management is the responsibility or waste collection is the responsibility of only government agencies. No, the waste management is also the responsibilities of the ones who produce it, that is the individuals and the organizations, private organizations. Why? Because the individuals and the organizations also produce waste, which means when it comes to waste management, it is a responsibility of both the one who produces or generates it, at the same time the government bodies like the municipalities. Now see, if I talk about the waste management in our country is guided by the principle of sustainable development, precaution and polluter pays. Sustainable development, precaution and the polluter pays. Now what is this principle of polluter pays? The principle of polluter pays, it says that the waste management polluter pay, which means the one who is contributing to pollution has an obligation to pay for the waste he generates, which means the ones who are responsible for the generation of waste, for example we individuals and let's say the private organizations, they are responsible, which means they have to bear the cost for the waste they are generating. This is referred to as the principle of polluter pays, right? Now, if I talk about the institution, now let us talk about the regulations of waste management. So, which are the institutions responsible for regulating the waste management or managing the waste in our country? One, we have the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. One, this is the ministry. Then we have Central Pollution Control Board, right? Then we have the municipalities. We have the municipalities. Then we have the State Pollution Control Board, right? Then we have the Ministry of Urban Development. Then we have the Ministry of Urban Development. So these are the stakeholders responsible for managing the waste in our country. One. Second, now according to the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act that led to the creation of municipalities, disposing the solid waste is the responsibility of the municipalities created by virtue of 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, right? Then we have the fundamental duty, Article 51A. Now this fundamental duty, it expects the citizens of a country to protect the environment. Protecting the environment is the fundamental duty of each and every citizen of our country. Then fourth, the solid waste management, which means that waste management is a state subject. Waste management is a state subject, which means it is the responsibility of the state government to ensure that the waste in the state is disposed as per the regulations or as per the rules framed by the state, right? Which means the authorities should adhere to the effective solid waste management practices. So the waste management practices have to be efficient, which means they should be sustainable, they should not cause pollution, which means the state authorities have to adhere by the effective solid waste management practices. So it is the ultimate responsibility lies with the state government. Why? Because waste management is a state subject. Right? Now let us discuss these solid waste management rules 2016, 2019 and 2020-22, right? Now, if I talk about the 2016 rules, this 16 rules replaced the 2000 rules, the rules that were framed in the year 2000. Now, which are the key provisions? One, waste segregation, which means the waste has to be segregated into biodegradable, non-biodegradable and hazardous, which means people have to segregate the waste, degradable waste, non-degradable waste and hazardous waste. The segregation has to happen compulsorily. Then the municipalities are responsible. Municipalities created by virtue of 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, they are responsible for what? Segregation, collection and then establishing processing facilities, which means they have to establish processing facilities where the waste will be processed, right? Then it also introduces user fees, which means that the people who generate waste have to pay a fee. People like us, individuals and the private companies have to pay a fee for generating waste. And all the people or for that matter businesses who fail to segregate waste will be subjected to strict penalties, fines. Then integration of informal sector, that is the kabadi walas have to be integrated into the waste management practices, which means the kabadi walas need to be trained. Skills need to be imparted to the kabadi walas so that they adopt modern technology to manage the waste, right? Then waste processing. Now the non-recyclable waste having high calorific value. The non-recyclable waste having high calorific value must be used for energy generation, which means here we are using waste for what? For energy generation. And this happens only when we invest in the technology. Waste processing, here we are using the non-recyclable waste and using technology we are converting the non-recyclable waste into energy recovery, right? So these are the provisions under waste management rules 2016. Then if I talk about the 2020-22 amendment, one, we have the extended producer responsibility. Now what do you mean by extended producer responsibility? Which means the producers are responsible for the entire life cycle of the products they manufacture. For example, let's say a company XYZ is responsible for the manufacturing of, let's say, plastic bottles, which means that company will be responsible not only for the production of the plastic bottles but also to ensure that the plastic bottles at the end of the life cycle is recycled. extended producer responsibility. So let's say my company manufactures, let's say, TVs. So the responsibility is not only with respect to producing or manufacturing TVs, but also once the life cycle of the TV ends, I have to recycle the waste. Either I do it by myself or I pay money to the companies that recycle the electronic waste, right? And then minimization of plastic waste, again this is self-explanatory, and then prohibition of single-use plastics, which means we are finding alternative ways for single-use plastics, right? Then these are the 2019 amendment rules. Prohibition of import, which means here, as India is a country that imports, let's say, plastic waste from advanced countries. Why? See, we import the plastic waste. Why? Because we recycle this plastic waste. Then, after recycling, the material that we produce can also be used as a raw material. There's a reason developing countries like India, they import the plastic waste from developed countries. We recycle the plastic waste, or what we do is we recycle the plastic waste and recover the material to be used as a raw material, right? So here under the 2019 rules, there is prohibition of import. There is, which means henceforth we won't be importing the solid waste, or rather the plastic waste. Then re-import of defective goods. Now for example, Indian companies that export electronic electronic or let's say the electrical appliances, in case the exported material turns out to be faulty, then they can re-import the material that they had exported without specific requirement from the government. These are the rules under 2019 amendment rules. Then the zero waste policy refers to the elimination of landfills. Elimination of landfills, which means we all know what are landfills. Landfills are those areas where vast volume of waste is generated, or rather dumped. These are the landfills. So the zero waste policy refers to the elimination of landfills, or to reduce the waste that is being sent to the landfills. So what happens is, the kabadi walas, they collect the waste from each and every household, and then this waste is sent to the landfills. So this policy, the aim of this policy is to reduce the waste being sent to the landfills to less than 10%. So of all the waste that is generated, less than 10% waste should be sent to the landfills. As of now, we send the waste to the tune of, let's say, around 80 to 90% of the waste is sent to the landfills. So these are the regulations: waste management rules 2016, 2019 and then 2020-22. Now these are the challenges faced in waste management in India. Rising waste generation. Why? Because of the increase in population, because the economy of a country is expanding, the digital economy, because the digital economy is also expanding, and that's the reason e-waste, large volume of e-waste is generated. This is a challenge. Second, poor implementation of rules, which means despite having the rules, which rules? Solid waste management rules of 2016, 2019 and 2020. Despite the existence of the rules are not implemented in letter and spirit, which means, for example, fundamental problems such as segregation does not happen at the source. Such fundamental problems they are not implemented at the source. Segregation should happen at the source. Unfortunately, such fundamental concerns are not being addressed at the source level, right? And then ultimately, if the waste is not segregated, the entire waste is getting dumped in the landfills. Then inadequate infrastructure. Now for the volume of waste that we generate, the infrastructure, which means we do not have the infrastructure sufficient or required to treat the vast volume of waste that we are generating in our country. Then dumping sites and landfills. See, in order to process the waste, you need land. We collect the waste, we process the waste, which means we recycle the waste so as to generate, let's say, energy. But for the processing sake, we need land. Unfortunately, we do not have land. And as we do not have land for processing, ultimately the entire waste gets dumped in the landfills. Which means, again, the waste in the landfills is not managed properly. As the waste in the landfills is not managed properly, harmful gases such as methane is released in the atmosphere, impacting the environment and the people staying around the landfills. Right? Then we have lack of data collection. Now, what is legacy waste management issues? Now, legacy waste management issues refers to the management of waste in the land landfills. For example, biomining. What is biomining? Biomining is a process of separating the waste from the landfills, and recovering valuable materials. So this biomining process was started in the year 2019, but because again it is extended by 2025 because of certain delays or certain bureaucratic hurdles. So the point is, the waste in the landfills is not getting or is not managed properly. Biomining is a process wherein you separate and recover the valuable materials from the waste in the landfills. Then we have lack of data collection. Now, because of the absence of data, right, the problem that arises is for the companies to invest. See, for the private companies to invest in the waste management, they need data, but we do not have data. Now, the private companies decide where to invest based on the data they have. There is no data. So, the private companies, or it's not feasible for the private companies to invest in a new area without the availability of data. And this limits innovation and effective planning. This limits innovation and effective planning. Then e-waste management gaps. Now, despite the fact that e-waste management rules are available, the process of segregation, collection, transportation, treating is inadequate, right? Then we have environmental and health hazards. Now, this again is very simple. Because of the release of harmful gases, it impacts the society, health of people and environment. Challenges in rural areas. Now, if the urban areas are getting little attention with respect to waste management, the rural areas are completely ignored. Weak public participation. Now, public awareness is very little in our country when it comes to waste management. That's the reason people end up littering on the streets, or they do not segregate the waste at the home, right? And health and safety of informal workers, or for that matter, kabadi walas. So here, as we discussed, they are subjected to exploitation. Why? Because uh, in the garbage centers, they have to clean or rather segregate the waste without any safety equipment. With their bare minimum hands, they have to segregate the waste. And in the waste we have harmful gases, then we have broken glasses, pesticides, electronic appliances. So it can severely injure the kabadiwalas or people who are in the business of segregating the waste. So these are some of the challenges faced in the waste management. We have discussed comprehensive challenges. So you can mention 4 to 5 challenges, more than sufficient. Now let us discuss solutions to waste management in India. Now first and foremost, it is very important, right, that we need to understand the types of waste. Understanding waste types is very important, which means waste management in today's or in the present age is not something that can be done without scientific data, which means understanding the type of waste, then the associated cost, then the disposal locations, all these needs to be taken into consideration. For example, India, for this matter, for the sake of waste management, has to invest in the innovative technologies, which means adoption of scientific and modern technology is very important to manage the waste in our country. Improving the waste collection. Now here the frequency of waste collection has to be increased. Now for the frequency to be increased, we need proper machines, or the optimization of the machines has optimization. There has to be optimization of the machines, right? Why? So as to collect or increase the frequency of waste collection. Then combining the informal and formal sectors, which means again training the kabadi wala so that they adopt the modern technology to manage the waste. Treating organic waste, for example, composting, right? Composting and biomethanation of organic biomethanation of organic waste is very important, so as to reduce the landfill use, which means we can convert the waste from the landfill into energy generation. Then converting dumps into, or rather converting dumps to sanitary landfills, which means now the landfills, here we have to convert the landfills into sanitary landfills, which means here we have to employ scientifically engineered methods so as to ensure that the methane emission from the landfills or contamination of the groundwater or pollution of the air is prevented. How? Through scientifically engineered practices. So we are employing scientifically engineered practices in the landfill so as to ensure that the methane, harmful gases, are not emitted, the groundwater is not getting polluted, or the air is not getting polluted. For this, we have to invest substantially in the technology, right? Then waste to energy, we have discussed micro composting centers for the wet waste and dry waste collection centers for the dry waste. Now establishing the micro composting centers for wet waste and dry waste is very important, especially at the ward level, so as to improve the waste management at the grassroots level, which means you are treating the waste at the grassroots level itself, or before the waste arrives at the landfill, you are treating the waste at the grassroots level. Then public awareness campaign, we have discussed is strict enforcement of regulations. Which regulations? The environment or the solid waste management rules of 2016, 19 and 2022. For example, the extended producer responsibility. So these provisions have to be enforced in letter and spirit, right? So these are the challenges and the solutions. Now, when it comes to initiatives related to waste management, now these are some of the initiatives. I request you to please download the DNE link or DNE notes link available in the comment section, and I want you to read the initiatives. Now this is self-explanatory, so I am not going to explain you, but you have to download the DNE notes and read by yourself the initiatives taken with respect to waste management in our country. I hope you understood the first topic, right? Now let us focus on the second topic. Now, the title is Delhi must look beyond H1B visa. Here we are going to understand the issue surrounding H1B, right? And this topic is important for GS paper 2, that is international relations. Now, this was a question asked with respect to Indian diaspora. Now, as the H1B visa will affect the Indian diaspora, so question on Indian diaspora can be asked in the examination, right? What is the context? Now, C. Raja Mohan, C. one of the geopolitical experts has argued that while the H1B visa is an important issue between India and the US, the point is we should not be fixated to just only this particular issue. We cannot completely focus on this issue. Why? Because of the upcoming president of USA, that is Donald Trump's policies with respect to technology. Now, this C. Rajamohan argues that in the coming months and years, the policies that the new president of America, Donald Trump, will be formulating will have consequences, long lasting consequences, and it will impact democracies like our country India. And that's the reason the focus has to be on the topics, subjects that have far-reaching consequences. And that's the reason the essence is we should not be fixated by this H1B visa only, and we should focus on other issues which can or which has a potential to impact our country, like the policies that Donald Trump will be framing with respect to technology. Now, first and foremost, we'll understand what is H1B visa. Now, H1B visa is a non-immigrant visa. Non-immigrant, which means the US employers like Facebook, Microsoft. Now, these companies in the America get a chance to employ or recruit people from other countries for or in the fields which requires specialized knowledge. So the American companies can hire people from outside America, which means the American companies can grant H1B visas to people whom they want to come to America and work for the country. Now, the H1B visa is issued for special occupations, which means special occupations that requires specialized knowledge. For example, let's say healthcare, technology, engineering, architecture, etc. So when the American companies do not find specialized workforce in their country, then by issuing the H1B visas, they can recruit people from outside the country and allow these workers to work for their companies. This is what is H1B visa, right? Now, what is the eligibility? The eligibility requirements is that an American company should issue a valid job offer. Let's say American company is offering a valid job offer. Second, I need to complete my graduation. Minimum qualification is graduation or let's say post graduation. And third, the American companies have to prove that specialized knowledge is missing in America, and that's the reason they are recruiting people outside America. So these are the eligibility requirements. Cap, every year around 85,000 H1B visas are issued. Simple. And now there are lakhs and lakhs of people who apply for H1B visa. Now these 85,000 people are selected through a lottery system. This is something that you need to remember, right? Now what are the features? Features one, once H1B visa is offered, right, the tenure is 3 years. It can be extended for another 3 years, that is for maximum 6 years. H1B visa is granted by the American employer, right? Now these are some specific information with respect to H1B visa. Now see, this image tells how many H1B petitions are being approved and for whom. So this, we have the data of India and China, right? So again, so these are the employers: Amazon, Infosys, Cognizant, Google, TCS, Meta Platforms, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, IBM. So these are the companies or these are the employers who issue H1B visas to Indians seeking to work abroad. Now, talking about the H1B visa debate, no doubt this H1B visa is very, very important for India's technology sector. Yes, why? Because Indians get a chance to go to America, learn new technology, right? Also see the life in America. So it is very, very important for India's technology sector. Now, the fact is, despite the anti-immigrant sentiment in America, which means the American people do not want that the American company should recruit people from outside America. Why? As the companies are recruiting people outside America, the local people are not getting jobs. The local people are not getting jobs. That's the reason, and the unemployment levels in America is increasing, and that's the reason the American people want that the company should not employ people outside America. Despite the anti-immigrant sentiment, the demand for the Indian origin workers is extremely high, right? Now, as I told you, commercial interests in the fields of healthcare, technology, agriculture, right? And then if you see that the political divide in, now there are two political parties in America, just like we have Congress and BJP, two big parties. We have the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats are the ones who support issuing H1B visas. They are in support of H1B, and the Republicans are against H1B visas, right? Now, if we talk about India's response to Trump's technology policies, right? For example, the Trump's technology policy go beyond H1B visas, right? And have significant implication for the global tech governance. So, in the future, how the governance will be, or how the governance will shape with respect to technology. How the governance will be shaped with respect to technology is something that we need to focus on. So Donald Trump's policy with respect to technology is something that we need to focus. Why? Because this will impact our countries like India and China. Right? Now, key aspects of Trump's tech policies. Now, technology has become a battleground between liberals and conservatives. Liberals associate with the Democrats, conservatives with the Republicans. Right? Now, Donald Trump recently, or the policy that Donald Trump has taken is shifting more towards the conservative ideologies, which means again Donald Trump wants that the company should hire people from America first, that is America first, was his slogan during the 2016 elections as well as during the 2024 elections. Right? So there's a clash between the liberal ideas and the conservative ideas. The major companies like Facebook, Microsoft, Google, they are against the conservative ideas, which means they want that the country should, or American government should, allow them to hire talented people from worldwide. Then techno libertarianism, which means now we know who is this Elon Musk, right? Tesla, founder of Tesla, and others advocating for minimal government intervention, which means major companies like Tesla, Google, they want that the government should intervene minimally, which means there should be no major intervention from the government in the businesses of the private companies. For example, when it comes to AI, Joe Biden from the Democratic political party wants that there should be regulation for AI. But companies like Tesla, they do not want that the government should intervene with respect to the technology business. Then the policies or the policy that Trump will frame in the coming days, the aim of the policy will be to maintain the technological superiority over China. Now, there's a competition between USA and China so as to retain the technological superiority with respect to, or superiority over technology. For example, artificial intelligence, cyber security, military technology. So there's a growing competition between America and China, and this in this context, India's role is pivotal, very important, providing tech talent, which means India is a country that provides talent, or rather, people to work in the American companies. Now, how will India respond to the changing dynamics? One, India's emerging role as a hub for tech talent and innovation positions it to benefit from the US tech boom, which means no doubt India is going to benefit immensely because of the tech boom that we are witnessing, right? India must align its strategic interest with the US. When it comes to technological development, we have to align our strategic interest with that of American so as to ensure that the Indians are benefiting. Why? Because when we collaborate with the American companies, the Indian people learn technology, modern innovative technology from the American companies. Then India must balance the growing competition between both these countries, that is, India will position herself as a partner in maintaining equilibrium in the global tech ecosystem, which means India will ensure that the rules framed for the global technology are balanced, which means it should not benefit only the developed countries, it should also benefit the both developed as well as the developing countries. India should continue investing in its domestic tech industry while being a part of the US tech boom. We also need to ensure that we are investing in the technology of our country, that is industries of our country, especially on AI, blockchain, semiconductor manufacturing. And then the diplomatic efforts, India's diplomatic efforts should focus on integrating its growing tech talent pool into global advancement. It should negotiate favorable terms in trade agreements, tech collaborations and investments to secure its future in the global tech race. Right? Now, if I talk about the other, we have discussed the H1B visa, but there are also other categories of visa. I just want you to refer to these. For example, H1B, we discussed H1B. Then we also have H2B, H2A, O visa, then B2 visa, V visa. So these are the different types, and I want you to please understand the different visa categories. And here, when it comes to STEM, STEM indicates science, technology, engineering and mathematics. As per the available data, India and China are the countries dominating in the STEM fields. Right? This is the second topic of the day. Okay. Now, why is India warming slower is the title of the third topic. So, this was a question asked in the year 2022. What is the context? The Indian Meteorological Department, the IMD stated that 2024 was the warmest year for India. In the history of our India, 2024 was the warmest year of our country. This was what the IMD stated in the year 2024. But the fact is, the increasing temperature in our country is less than the global increase in temperature or than the average increase in the global temperature, which means that the temperature or the increase in temperature in our country is less than the average global temperature, which means India is warming slower compared to the world, which is a good sign, but that doesn't mean that we have nothing to worry. Now, if I talk about the global temperature trends, right? The World Meteorological Organization recorded 2024 as the hottest year in the history of the world. 2024 was the hottest year ever recorded. One. Second, the Earth's temperature, the global temperature rose over 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level. Above pre-industrial level, the temperature rose over 1.5 degrees Celsius. We have breached the 1.5 degree limit that we had set for the world. Third, the polar regions. Now, the polar regions, that is, for example, the Arctic region, is also experiencing extreme warming. Even the polar regions are experiencing extreme warming. For example, the temperature in the polar region is rising at least twice the global average. So these are the global trends. 2024 hottest year in the world, right? Temperature has crossed over 1.5 degrees Celsius. Even the polar regions are experiencing extreme warming. As I told you, right, as per the IMD, 2024 was the warmest year for our country. Why? Because the temperature rose 0.65 degrees Celsius higher than the average temperature in the year 1991 to 2020. So, in this 30 years, in the year 2024, the temperature rose by 0.65 degrees Celsius than the average temperature recorded in the last 3 decades. Then, so when compared to this 1901 and 1910, this decade, that is the first decade of the 20th century, India's warming is estimated at about 1.2 degree Celsius as compared to 1901 to 1910. Indian temperature, the average temperature rose by 1.2 degrees Celsius. Now, the global assessment. So, when the world records the temperature, the global assessment includes the data, the land temperature as well as the ocean temperature. But the Indian data accounts only for the land data. So, the Indian data accounts only for the land data, while as the world data includes both land as well as the ocean data. Right? Now, the question is, why is India warming slower? First, the tropical location, that is location near to the equator, which means the warm air that India traps is transferred to the polar is transferred to the polar regions. It's transferred away from the tropics to the polar region, right? At the same time, as there's a lot of heat because India is located close to equator, it also rains. Because of the effect or because of the rainfall effect, the temperature that we see along the tropics is comparatively lower than in the polar region. Why? We'll discuss it. Now, the tiny particle in India's air, it reflects sunlight. So, these tiny particles in the air, right, it helps in the formation of clouds. So, because of the formation of clouds, this helps in rainfall and this reduces the warming. Second point. Third, no ocean effect. As I told you, we only account for the land temperature and do not consider or do not take into account the temperature of the ocean. Then fourth one is polar versus equator. Now, as I told you that the polar region, the Arctic region is also experiencing extreme heat. Now, because of extreme heat, it results in melting of ice. Melting of ice. Now, the melting of ice, it captures more heat. It captures more heat. So, the melting ice captures more heat, and that's the reason the polar region experiences more warming than the equatorial regions. So, these are the reasons. I hope you understood the third topic as well. Now, let us focus on the fourth topic. In this article, we will focus more on the data localization, the draft Digital Personal Data Protection Rules and the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, right? So, this was a question asked in the year 2020 on the data protection regulation, right? Now, recently there's a consultation between the IT ministry, between the IT ministry and the global stakeholders such as Meta, Google and Microsoft. During the consultation, there were concerns regarding the draft digital personal data protection rules. During the consultation, during the meeting, there were concerns regarding this particular rules. First, we'll understand the act and then the rules. So, what is Digital Personal Data Protection Act? Now, the purpose of the act is to safeguard individuals' personal data. Right now, majority of the Indians, they use electronic gadgets. For example, they use Facebook, WhatsApp, YouTube. Now, the purpose of this act is to safeguard the privacy data or personal data of each and every individual of our country. Key features: right to data protection. It allows each and every individual to protect his or her data. Allows each and every individual to protect his or her data, which essentially means that the person also has a right to delete the data, personal data from the internet. One. Second, data processing and consent. Let's say, for example, when you are using Facebook, the Facebook will, give out a message. A message will be given that if you agree to the policies of Facebook or let's say Microsoft, then only you can use the platform, which means it requires explicit informed consent. It requires explicit consent or permission, right, when it comes to processing the data. Then data localization, which means the Indian government mandates that the data of the Indian should be stored in our country and should not be exported to the origin, the country of origin. The data of Indian should be stored in our country. Then regulatory authority. This act establishes Data Protection Board of India. Data Protection Board of India, and this body is responsible for compliance and grievance redressal. Compliance and grievance redressal, right, which means if any of the companies are violating the laws framed under this act, one can go and file a complaint in this particular authority, with this authority, right? Then data breach. So in case the companies are violating the rules, the organization must notify individuals. The organizations must notify the individuals. And then if any of the companies are found to be violating the provisions of this act, strict penalties and fines are imposed on the companies. The essence of this particular act is to ensure that the data of each and every individual is protected, is safeguarded. The data of Indians should not be used for any, let's say, unethical practices or illegal practices, right? That's the reason it allows individuals to protect their data. Then under the act, the 2025 rules are framed. Under the act, the 2025 rules are framed. The rules, see, the act was framed by the Indian Parliament, but how to implement the act? Now, to implement the act, certain rules are framed. Now, the purpose of the rules, again, it's the same: to safeguard the citizens' personal data, to enable data transfer, how the data can be transferred and deleted, as well as user-centric digital rights. Promote transparency, accountability, and compliance. Right? So, these rules are the rules aim to operationalize, to bring this law into effect. Now, which are the major concerns? One, as I told you, the Indian law mandates that the companies like Microsoft and Google should store the data in our country. Now, to store the data requires or it involves high operational cost, because to store the data of crores of people you need infrastructure, which means you have to spend more money. Now, the big companies have money to invest in the infrastructure to store the data locally, but the small companies do not have the money to invest in the infrastructure to store the data locally, which means if the smaller companies are forced to invest in the technology or infrastructure to store the data locally, this will limit the innovation. So the money the small companies could have invested for innovative purpose, the same money they have to invest in the infrastructure, because the Indian government wants that the data has to be stored locally, right? And now the Indian company is looking, or the Indian government is looking after this issue, how to balance the interests of the small companies and the big companies, and most importantly to secure the digital rights of the Indians. Then second is parental consent for minors, which means platforms must verify, the platforms such as Facebook, Instagram must verify the parental consent, which means if the users are under the age of 18, they have to verify the permission from the parents. But the problem is falsification. It is very easy to falsify your age, right? At the same time, see, even the parents, the digital literacy of the parents is very low. So the users under the age of 18 can easily falsify their age, right? Cross border data transfer, right? Which means which are the classes of data that can be, that can be exported outside India. It is very important and very significant to categorize the classes of data that can be sent across the border, right? But again, the problem is, if India mandates that the data has to be stored locally, this will impact the global analytics. This will impact the global analytics, which essentially means that, for example, if India does not allow the data to be transferred outside India, so the global analytical companies, how can the companies analyze the data if they do not have the data? That's the reason it is important to have the data so as to analyze the trends globally. And then behavioral tracking of children. Tracking of children has to be ethical. Unethical tracking of children is illegal. At the same time, this would invade the privacy, of children. So these are some of the issues arising out of the rules framed under the 2023 Act, right? The essence is to safeguard the privacy rights of individuals. The last topic talks about Hamas accepting the draft agreement for Gaza ceasefire, right? So first and foremost, let us try to understand the issue. What exactly is the issue? Now, the Palestinians and Israel, especially Hamas. Hamas is a militant organization of Palestine. So the one that you see in the red color indicates the territory of Palestinians, and the one in dark blue indicates the territories of Israel. Now the Palestinians, especially Hamas and Israelis, have been fighting over since 1987. There have been so many wars fought against Israel between Hamas and Israel. It has led to humanitarian crisis. Lakhs and lakhs of people have died in this war, right? And what are the concerns? Hamas want that the Palestinians should not exist, and Israelis now want that the Hamas should be totally wiped out. So if you see, Of this entire land, 50% land was given to Palestine, 50% land was given to Israel. But now if you see, the Israelis are expanding their territory. They're occupying the territories of Palestinians, and that's the reason Hamas is fighting against Israel and they want to wipe out Israel. So there's a ongoing fight. Now especially the war intensified especially in the year 2023 when Hamas launched a massive attack in Israel, and post that Israel launched counter-offensive against Hamas. Once Israelis launched counter-offensive against Hamas, close to 46,000 Palestinians got killed. So if you see, this is a Gaza city, this one, 90% of the people living in the Gaza city got displaced because of the war. Because of the war, humanitarian aid could not reach the Gaza city. And finally, after months of fighting, the Hamas have accepted a draft agreement, ceasefire, that is temporary. Both the stakeholders, both the entities agree to stop fighting. Right now, this is a draft agreement. It is yet to be approved by the cabinet of Israel. The cabinet of Israel has not yet approved. The negotiations were going on in Doha. Where is Doha? Doha is in Qatar. Doha is in Qatar. Now we need to see if the draft agreement that the Hamas have accepted will be accepted by the cabinet of Israel, and most importantly, if the draft agreement will lead to peace or rather stability between Israelis and Hamas. So this is the essence of the fifth topic. I hope you understood the fifth topic as well. Now let us discuss the practice questions. So this discuss the challenges and solutions related to hazardous waste management in India, focusing on issues surrounding waste generated from Union Carbide India Limited. So in the introduction, talk about what is waste management, right? In the body of the answer, talk about the different types of hazardous waste, right? The biomedical waste, right? Current waste management issues, which are the waste management issues, then talk about this. So we have discussed each and every dimension. All the dimensions that we have discussed, you have to mention it in this particular question or rather answer, right? So starting with the types of waste, the challenges with respect to waste management, solution, initiatives launched by the government of India, and finally conclusion, right? Now these are the questions asked from the DNA that was discussed on the 11th of Jan. The Kalamkari paintings, known for their intricate freehand designs using natural dyes, originate from Andhra Pradesh. Yes, this statement is correct. The Pochampalli Ikat, a resist dyeing weaving technique, is a traditional craft associated with the state of Kannur. It is associated with the state of Telangana. So the second statement is correct. Answer is option E. Next, with reference to the use of AI in India's defense sector, the Defense Artificial Intelligence Council oversees policy formulation and integration of AI in defense operations. Yes. Agni D, an AI-based surveillance software, has been deployed for strategic monitoring along India's border. Yes. Microsoft's 3 billion investment in Telangana exclusively supports AI-based military applications in India. Now, this is doubtful. AI-enabled UAVs are being deployed for reconnaissance and intrusion detection in border. Yes, even this one is correct. So this correct answer is option B. So this investment supports the infrastructure development and not exclusively the military applications. So Option B is the correct one. Statement 3 is incorrect. Next question, the Act mandates 33% reservation for women in the Lok Sabha, state legislative assemblies and Delhi Assembly. Yes. The Act will be implemented immediately after the passage of the Act. No, this will be implemented after the census. After the census. So, this one is incorrect. Option A is the only correct one. Right? So, option A is the correct answer. Now, these are the questions from today's DNA topic. So, I request you to please revise the topics that we have discussed and attempt the questions using the link given in the comment box. The DNA quiz is, or the link of the DNA quiz, you will find it in the comment section. I request you to please download the link, attempt the questions and post the score in the comment section. So, that's it from today's DNA. I request you to please hit the like, subscribe icon. Thank you so much for watching.